Hi, everyone. Uh, Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to Leisrealtalk. All right, so we'll talk about why Beijing covered up the outbreak and why it won't accept foreign aid or foreign assistance. Um, we have anxiously we have been anxiously watching China's COVID cases surge as the 1.3 billion Chinese struggle to survive the pandemic blowing through the country. Um, Today, we'll talk about how Beijing has covered up the outbreak and who it will blame for the public health disaster, and why I don't think it will accept foreign aids. We'll also discuss how Western countries should develop a better strategy to deal with China's outbreak, which can potentially lead to a global public health and economic crisis. So let me start by giving you an update on the current situation in China. Um, Beijing officially announced two death cases, uh, two COVID death cases yesterday, despite various videos, social media posts, and reports that prove otherwise. No Chinese believes Beijing's data, which carries no credibility right now. Right now, Chinese people are desperately looking for OTC drugs to relieve pain and fever. I've seen Chinese parents offering 10,000 yuan, which is about 15,000 US dollars, to get a bottle of Tylenol or ibuprofen for their child who's suffering from fever. There are various videos showing Chinese waiting outside the drug manufacturing plant to get the drug. And this shortage has extended overseas. A list of countries that I compiled this afternoon that have seen Chinese buying large quantities of ibuprofen or what do you call that? I think the medical name for Tylenol is paracetamol. Paracetamol. Well, they are Taiwan, Japan, Canada, New Zealand, the United States, Australia, and the United Kingdom. And there might be other countries that I have not seen as of this afternoon. So let me show you pictures that I've seen. So these are the two drugs that Chinese are looking for, right? So here are two pictures, and I don't know which country this was taken from. I think it's probably Australia or New Zealand. And this is in the US. This is taken from Costco. So it's Tylenol and ibuprofen. Costco, more Costco, and I think this person, this at the register, I think she already has tons of drugs on the belt, and then there's more like vitamin C. I think what's on the trolley is vitamin C. And this is actually a picture taken in the United States. I think this is CVS. And look at how the shelf is empty. And this sign, this is probably not US. This is probably Australia. It's in a Western country, but the sign is in Chinese and says Panadol, which was one of those OTCs. It says everyone can buy at most 100 tablets. So it says if it's in a package of 20 tablets, you could buy 5. If it's a package of 40, you can only buy 2. Thank you for your cooperation. So, yeah. And then Japanese media has reported Chinese shipping the drugs to China. A Japanese TV station interviewed someone who went through, I think, 7 drugstores in Japan, in a Japanese city, to buy these drugs and send them to China. And in Taiwan, politicians are discussing if they should support the mainland or they should ban shipping the drugs to China, right? And the most frightening situation right now. So other than the drug shortage, the most frightening situation right now is the meltdown of China's medical system. And let me show you some videos. There's a video that I translated for you. It's given by a young lady from Beijing who recently went to a hospital, and she described her experience. She talked rather quickly, so the subtitles run through very fast. Let me just play it. Here we go.
以后呢，我其实当时去
Okay, let me start from the very beginning.
现在情绪状态有点激动，就是昨天可能一些感官和一些刺激，就是让我现在感觉我这个视频我不得不录，虽然我也不知道能不能发出去，所以也尽量去试一试吧。大家都知道我之前阳转阴了，对吧？但阳转阴好了以后呢，我其实当时去工作了，工作以后一下身体又累垮了，然后我整个人又开始发烧，烧了连续5天，高烧最高烧到40度2。我昨天就去医院发热门诊了。你知道发热门诊里边什么景吗？就是一群老头老太太，然后一看就是中年以上的人，然后有部分年轻人啊，然后大家在那儿坐着等号，号码排到了396号，而且有一个老头跟那儿急了，说我从早上9点钟已经到下午2点钟了，我药还没有开到手。你知道什么状态吗？所有的工作人员在门口守卫的就已经开始闭眼打瞌睡，就明显已经过度劳累。每一个医生基本上都是扬着给你在做检测，然后到我抽血的时候，你们看我这个地方为什么青了，你知道吗？一个非常年轻的医生，他一边咳嗽着一边手抖着给我去抽那个静脉血。我说姑娘，你是阳了吗？他说我阳了5天了，从第1天到现在一直在工作。我说为什么呀？他说没办法，我们就是要继续在这个岗位上去做。就是每一个阳了的医生还在给阳了的病人治病，你知道对于他们来说工作强度有多大吗？然后你每一个号要排3到4个小时。然后排到你了，你看到医生了，医生给你开药的时候，每个药只能给你开1盒。医生给我开了1盒，说给你开盒莲花清瘟吧。然后我说我需要盒布洛芬，他说没有布洛芬。我说感冒中剂有吗？没有感冒中剂，就是现在能有的药就这些，能有相同功效的药就已经很不错了。
Okay, so that was part 1 of her talk, and I thought it's quite dramatic. And here's part 2.
发了个通告说给北京下发了。北京发了个通告说给北京下发了350万的物资，其中就是有药品和物资。你们知道北京人口有多少人吗？2180万人，你们现在自己就可以去百度上去搜。那2000多人发了350万的药的物资啊，相当于如果只有100万人得了这个病，每个人只能花3块钱买药，药店卖吗？医院卖吗？你到哪儿去买3块钱的药啊？那你想，如果3块钱的药我买不起的话，100万人得病，那现在这个病已经高发到将近500万人，或者甚至1000万人以上了，你说有多少人买不到药啊？昨天是我第一次感觉到人生与死之间就是1秒钟的时间，就是非常非常的近，你就感觉你生活当中所有的困难、所有的烦恼、所有的痛苦都不是事儿。就是你看着救护车10分钟一辆，10分钟一辆，10分钟一辆，然后每一个人都在里边推着救护车，赶紧往里把人往里推。好多老头老太太，有没有呼吸的、窒息的、昏迷的，坐在那个轮椅上就哼唧的、嗷嗷叫的，什么样的人都有。还有一些基础病的病人，然后医生一边在抢救基础病，一边在抢救你的阳性，就是整个医院是一团乱。
Okay, so now you get a sense of what the hospitals are like in Beijing right now. I think she gave us a very visual picture of what it's like. And so these doctors and nurses, right, who are seeing patients when they themselves are sick, I just feel very bad for them. And here's another video that actually, it's a surveillance video that actually captured a sick doctor collapsing in front of his patients. And let me share that with you. Okay, so let me start. So here in the beginning, you see he's already struggling, trying to take a look at the kid. Look how slow he is. And then he throw himself back to the chair, and he wants to take a break. He's tired. And he pulls himself to look at the computer. And then he just collapsed. And the patient called out to get help. And they tried to resuscitate him. All right. I thought that's just very sad, but, very dramatic. So we've only seen the outbreak for the past 2 weeks, right? Since Beijing announced the new 10 public health measures on December 7th to relax zero COVID, it's only been 2 weeks. And how did it get to such a dire situation? Well, the timing seemed perfect, right? Beijing relaxed zero COVID policy, and then boom, the cases surged. But that may be what Beijing wants us to believe. A senior member within the CCP's political and law system, the 政法委, the almighty organization that's in charge of everything, the legal system, the public security, the police force, right? So it's called the political and law system. Someone who is part of that system, a senior member of that organization in Beijing, told Radio Free Asia yesterday anonymously that the outbreak in Beijing started as early as the party congress, which took place during the last week of October. He said that the large-scale infections occurred in Beijing's hospitals before zero COVID policy was lifted. Medical professionals and elderly people were hard hit, but the authorities had been hiding the truth. He said that his family member, I think it might be his parent, because it sounds like it's an elderly family member, was living or was at a Beijing hospital for rehab. Because Beijing was hosting the party congress, the hospital did not allow patients to be discharged, saying that there would be a risk of getting COVID outside. The fact is, at the time, the hospital already had a COVID outbreak. But because of the party congress was going on, the authorities didn't want the hospitals to release these patients. And also because of the strict zero COVID policy, hospitals did not want to report the real COVID cases, nor could they treat the COVID patients. So patients were given a random diagnosis such as urinary tract infection or unknown fever. Anyway, the doctors didn't say the patients had COVID. They didn't even bother to test the patients to avoid getting positive results. So it was all hush-hush. But because this official, the guy who talked to RFA, Radio Free Asia, the anonymous guy, had connections and is a VIP, the doctor gave his family member an antigen test, and it came out positive. The guy said that his relative was infected at the hospital during the rehab and later got transferred to a few of other top hospitals in Beijing to get treatment. I believe he was allowed to leave after the party congress was over. But also because of that was also how COVID got spread from hospital to hospital. This anonymous guy said that his family member eventually died of COVID, but the cause of death was officially urinary tract infection. The guy reviewed that major hospitals in Beijing already had COVID outbreaks before the white paper revolution. By the beginning of December, it had got completely out of control. The only thing that the Beijing Municipal Health Commission and hospital did was to restrict patients from being discharged from hospitals and to prevent healthcare workers from going home. And the real situation of the pandemic was tightly sealed by the authorities. Hospitals did not care to report COVID cases or treat the patients without permissions from the top authorities. It was only after the official announcement of the death of former CCP leader Jiang Zemin It was until then that information about the outbreak in Beijing was gradually released to the public. But by this time, a large number of elderly people infected with COVID were either dead or in critical condition. And Beijing hospitals were already in total chaos. And that's what we've seen. That led to the situation we now see today. And that's what you've heard from the videos I played. He said the cover-up directly resulted in the death of a large number of retired CCP officials, and some of the officials who died were high-ranking. This guy told RFA that he always thought that he had great social connections and resources, but what happened to him and his family made him realize that he was helpless. He said that he was at the top 1% of social ladder, and only 1 out of 100 people in Beijing can enjoy the status he enjoys or enjoys the resources he enjoys. But official or administrative ranks do not mean much anymore because every place is running over capacity. And he said the situation for ordinary Chinese is even worse. I think this guy's rank isn't low because he said he controls a very large amount of resources. And also there are a lot of officials in Beijing, right? So if he's the top 1%, that means his rank isn't low. But being who he is, it took him 5 days to cremate the body of his family member after he died. Looking back, there were a series of events that seemed to match what he said, and that can prove that the outbreak already started before the white paper movement. So here is a list of events. So on November 20th, so this list was compiled by a Chinese netizen, right? So he said, on November 20th, the Canadian Visa Center in Beijing announced that it would be closed from November 22nd, and no date was given for reopening. VFS Global, the operator that handles visa services for foreign countries, embassies, and consulates in China, also closed some of its Beijing visa centers on November 22nd. At the time when the protests were breaking out, Shanghai issued a number of measures requiring stockpiling, requiring the local municipal agencies. Remember, I think I shared those with you when we talked about the white paper movements. So the local government agencies in Shanghai were required to stockpile supplies for at least 60 days. And just before that, we've seen Shandong province decided to spend 23 billion renminbi to construct 119 permanent quarantine camps. I made a video on that. I'll share with you the links at the end. On November 28th, the U.S. Embassy in China called on American citizens in China to stockpile supplies for 14 days. On December 11th, Japan closed its visa operations in China. On December 14th, a WHO director revealed that China had an explosive number of cases before the regime relaxed the zero-COVID policy. On December 14th, the White House said the U.S. was ready to help if Beijing requested assistance with the outbreak. On December 15th, the U.S. suspended all visa services in China, and on the same day, Germany also suspended visa services. And the person who listed these events said that if you look at these events separately, they probably don't mean much. But in hindsight, when they are reviewed together, they support the argument that a major outbreak already took place long before the CCP relaxed the zero-COVID policy and even before the white paper movement broke out. And I want to add that Western governments and organizations like WHO also had known that. Reuters reported today that some US and European officials are struggling to figure out how or if they can help Beijing to mitigate a crisis that will hurt the global economy, further constrain supply chains, and spawn new COVID variants of concern. It said that democratic governments are struggling to find a diplomatic way to help China to stem a burgeoning crisis with global health and economic implications in a way that the Chinese government is willing to accept. I think these countries should have a better strategy because trying to find a diplomatic way to offer China help is fertile because the CCP won't accept it. It has a different set of priorities than the rest of the world. Saving people's life isn't its priority, but saving the regime's face or saving the regime's power is. The anonymous Beijing official said that in his interview yesterday with Radio Free Asia, that the CCP will blame the surge of COVID cases in China on the white paper movement. By the time white paper movement broke out, Beijing knew that the pandemic was already getting out of control. So Beijing ended zero COVID policy swiftly after the authorities saw the movement as the perfect excuse to blame for the outbreak. The CCP will take the opportunity to channel the public anger toward the white paper movement. The CCP may persecute some of the people who demanded political freedom in the movement and call them the hostile forces that caused the massive outbreak. Remember in my Saturday's live stream, I shared with you how Wuxi city in Jiangsu province was criticized by higher authority for not having enough COVID cases and how the regime wants to get as many people to have COVID as possible. Beijing is pushing for the outbreak, or Beijing is pushing for the peak of this wave to come as fast as it can, ideally to have the wave over by March, partly because it wants to reopen its economic recovery stage as soon as possible, and partly because if it drags on too long, it's hard for the regime to associate the outbreak with the white paper movement. Another reason is and so if CCP blames the white paper movement and outside forces, it cannot accept assistance from foreign countries. Think about it. If China accepts help from the United States, how can it blame the United States or the outside foreign forces at the same time, right? That's what I think the United States and other Western countries should come up with a better strategy in dealing with the CCP in this public health crisis. If they want to mitigate the impact on global economy and public health, they should do the right thing by sticking to the principle of transparency. They should let the Chinese and the people around the world know about the pending crisis in China, because if they don't, the crisis can affect us all. They should send out warnings. The WHO should send out warnings. That's its responsibility. But we didn't see that. Western mainstream media didn't report it until social media videos and posts from China started to leak out, and then the WHO and media started to say something about it. I think only by letting the people know the real situation, the real risk of the outbreak in China, will the world be successful in pushing Beijing to acknowledge the problem and to be somewhat transparent in managing the pandemic. It will not be completely transparent, but it could at least be somewhat transparent. Trying to save the CCP's face is the most unwise and counterproductive thing to do, because it will make you subject to CCP's agenda. Western countries should not be concerned with saving CCP's face or trying to be diplomatic about it, because you can't save its face. It's not salvageable. Its credibility over the pandemic has tanked to nothing right now in China. Right? People are angry at the fact that Beijing is telling people 2 people died from COVID on December 17th. So when you try to save Beijing's face, it will only hurt your own credibility. So that's why I think the Western countries should quickly readjust their strategy and do better. All right, so that ends my presentation. Let me see if people have any questions for me. Let me see. 3 from William Warren, 3 years, no COVID plans. You can't say it doesn't have a plan or it didn't have a plan. It had a plan. Zero COVID was its plan. But you have to take like its plan is always based on its priority, which is to help the regime to stay in power. Its priority is never about saving people's life. So that's why its plan will never work. It had a plan, right? But it's just a terrible plan. And if the world try to follow CCP's plan, it's just going to bring disaster. I remember at the beginning days of the pandemic, the world followed CCP's plan by, basically the world did not know how to handle it. And then so we followed how Beijing handled it in the early days. And then quickly the world, we separated from the CCP, and they continued with their zero COVID plan by locking down, all of this mass testing, and then I think the world figured out that it's just not feasible. And so, yeah, so you can't say CCP didn't have a plan. All right, so, okay, let me see. From David, okay, so yes, Western media are showing videos of cremation in regards to the death. Are you seeing that? Of course I'm seeing that, but they're doing that right now. I'm saying it's too late. My whole argument is the Western governments know that the outbreak, WHO and Western governments had known the outbreak in China before the white paper revolution. Right? They had known the outbreak, but they didn't do anything. They didn't say anything. They waited until social media posts are everywhere. Then Western media started to report the cremation situation. But my argument is, why didn't they tell the public that there's an outbreak? They could have saved Chinese people's lives. So my whole argument is, while they are shutting down visa services, while they're sending out warning messages to Americans living in China, they didn't say, well, there will be a big outbreak in China. Western governments and organizations knew that, but they didn't do much. Western media did not report it. And they tried to save Beijing's face. They tried to come up with the diplomatic ways of dealing with this, but it will not work because Beijing will not listen to them. But by the time you change, it's already too late because we're already in this situation right now, right? So that's the mistake I'm saying. And Western organizations and governments have much better resources than I do. I'm sitting here watching Twitter to get information. They have their intelligence. They have their resources. They know these things way ahead of me, and they just don't have a clear understanding of the CCP. So their strategy does not work. So I hope I answered that question. So here's a question. Do you really believe the report of outbreak is true? My friend living in China says reports are fake. I don't know what you mean the outbreak is fake. You're saying that people in China are not dying from COVID? I don't know what you're I don't know what report you're referring to. I have family members in China who have COVID, and all their friends are having COVID. What are you talking about? The reports are fake? Okay. I'm sorry. I'm just picking random questions here. Um, um, I don't know. There's somebody who sent me a Chinese message. I don't know who you're talking about. Okay, I'll translate. This guy, I don't know if you're a Wu Mao or you're paid by someone to do this, but I'll translate his. I don't know if it's a he or she, and I hope you're not addressing this to me because I have Chinese people's well-being in my heart. So I hope you're addressing this to somewhere else that you don't like. But this person said, I'm just translating this Chinese post for you. He said, this girl, this young lady, why don't you go die? Why don't you die? Um, I support the medical professionals for this nation. Didn't we want to open up? Now you're complaining that this opening up is not good for the country. Your brain has a problem. Uh, who can manage? It's such a large country of 1.3 billion. It's a large country comprised of 1.3 billion people. Who can lead? If we replace the leader, who can run it better, right? Beijing still has medications. What's wrong with it? Okay, I translated. I think this is exactly what CCP want us to believe. I mean, you just explained the whole logic of CCP. I don't even need to respond to that. I just hope you cherish the opportunity to have a chance to get on YouTube or other platforms outside China to get uncensored or less censored information for your own benefits so that your life and your well-being is in a better place. It's not about me. It's about you if you live in China. I'm not doing this for myself. Okay? And I know what I'm doing. Okay. So let me see. William Warren, CCP war plan as bad as CCP COVID plan. We hope so, right? Let's hope so. Taiwan, okay. All right. I love that. Okay. So from Dewey Escala, okay, I hope I pronounced your name right. We are seeing a repeat of 2019 because our government officials ignore the telltale signs of another COVID outbreak worse than 2-3 years ago. The world should expose the CCP's stupidities. I agree with you. Well said. Thank you. All right. People tell me to ignore Wu Mao. Yeah, I thought it's just funny just to. All right, we will ignore the Wu Mao. Okay, so someone should recruit. This is from Quizmaster China. Someone should recruit Lei for the United Front Work Department. She's doing more to save China than anyone I know. Well, the United Front Work Department is CCP's PR department outside China that does infiltration. I don't know if they will hire me. All right. It's a worry that when people travel home for the Chinese New Year from cities, they will bring COVID to small towns all at once. Yes, it is a concern because Chinese New Year is coming up. And I mean, a bigger concern is really the rural area in China because they really don't have much medical establishment at all. Beijing is probably the city that has the most medical resources. So when the pandemic reaches the rural area, that's really a big concern. So I got late to laugh. Yes. Okay. Why don't you just die? Sounds like something the CCP would say. Yeah. All right. I can only laugh. It's just pathetic. All right. So that's it. All right. So I hope this is helpful. I'm just calling on Western organizations to really come up with a strategy quickly to handle this uh, because yeah, people's livelihood is at stake. So, alrighty, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day and rest of your evening. Okay, bye bye. Bye.